Welcome to the Stoic Tide. Have you ever felt your peace crumble because of one person? Their silence cutting deeper than their words. Their absence heavier than their presence. That's the quiet cruelty of attachment. You hand over the reins of your inner world, letting someone else decide when you rise, when you fall, when you feel whole. And slowly, almost without noticing, you become a prisoner of their choices. But here's what I've learned. Attachment isn't love. It's dependence. It drains your strength and makes you fragile. In the very moments you need to be strong, the Stoics warned us long ago. When you tie your worth to what you cannot control, suffering will always find you. Detachment then isn't about turning cold or heartless. It's about reclaiming your center. It's the quiet art of breaking chains you never realized you forged. So the question is this: what happens when you finally stop clinging? What happens when you choose clarity over illusion, freedom over fear? Stay with me, and let's step into that path together. As we step into the first chapter, imagine the sharp silence that follows heartbreak. The kind of silence that feels heavier than any words could. Most people call it tragedy. I call it tuition. Pain is the price life charges when it wants to graduate you into a stronger version of yourself. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care for timing. It breaks you open so you can finally see the cracks that were always there. Some people do not arrive in your life to stay. They arrive to tear down illusions. They arrive to force you to see yourself clearly. They arrive as uninvited teachers. Think about the last time you clung to someone who didn't value you. At first, it feels like losing something precious. But when the dust settles, what you've really lost is the fantasy you built around them. The illusion that they cared the way you cared. The illusion that love could erase indifference. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." The same applies to love. If it is not true, do not keep holding it. Looking back, I see that I wasn't losing anything real. I was gaining clarity, a lens sharp enough to cut through my own excuses. I saw where I betrayed myself. I saw where I painted red flags white. I saw how quickly I surrendered my self-respect in the name of affection. That realization was brutal, but it was clean. Now imagine asking a different question in the middle of that pain. Not why did this happen to me, but what did this teach me? That small shift turns chaos into wisdom. The Stoics believe that life repeats its lessons until you learn them. Fail to grasp the meaning and you will see the same patterns, the same faces in different forms, circling back into your life. That's why so many people wander in cycles, mistaking repetition for fate. The moment you pull the lesson out of the fire, the cycle ends. You don't need their closure. You don't need their apology. You don't need another chance. Wisdom is your closure, and wisdom outviews every explanation you thought you wanted. Here's where it gets harder. The lesson is not always about them. Sometimes it's about you, the one who betrayed you. Did they not expose your desperate need for loyalty? The one who ghosted you? Did they not show you your craving for validation? The one who made you feel small? Did they not reveal the fragile ground you were standing on? Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by things but by the view which they take of them." The pain reveals your view, and in that revelation lies the chance to rebuild. I remember my own turning point. I had wrapped my worth around someone else's indifference, believing that if I loved hard enough, they would finally see me. I ignored the truth because the fantasy was sweeter. I convinced myself my devotion could heal their distance. But reality has no patience for illusions. The truth was simple. When someone truly values you, you don't need to ask where you stand. If you are always wondering, you are not standing anywhere at all. That realization cut deep, but it freed me. Here's something most won't admit. Some of the worst people in your life will become your greatest teachers. The betrayer teaches you the priceless weight of loyalty. The one who disappeared without a word teaches you the power of indifference. The one who belittled you teaches you to grow taller than their shadows. Seneca once wrote, "Fire tests gold. Adversity tests brave men. Fire burns, but it also refines. Pain wounds, but it also chisels." Would you have grown if they had stayed? Would you have built boundaries if they had treated you better? Would you have stopped chasing shadows if they hadn't turned away? Probably not. Pain forces transformation in a way comfort never will. This is why gratitude paradoxically belongs even to those who hurt you. Not because they deserve to inflict the wound, but because the wound became the doorway. Their actions shoved you toward a truth you refused to face. Without them, you might still be clinging to illusions. Without them, you might still believe that love has to be loud, dramatic, and painful to be real. But reality is quieter, steadier, and much harder to ignore. So let's step into the heart of the lesson. You don't lose people, you lose illusions. And in losing illusions, you gain sight. Sight of your own patterns, sight of your own strength, Sight of the life waiting beyond the ashes of what you once thought you needed. Pain is not an enemy. It is the exam proctor sitting silently while you wrestle with the answers. Pass the test and you walk forward free. Refuse it and you sit in the same room facing the same questions until you learn. This is the first doorway of detachment. Reframing loss into instruction. It's not about erasing memories or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about seeing the burn for what it was. A teacher that branded clarity into your skin. You stop wasting pain. You stop circling the same wounds. You gather the lesson and you rise with it. And once you learn to see people as lessons rather than losses, everything shifts. Detachment begins to feel less like a battle and more like a release. You stop asking why they broke you and start asking how the break reshaped you. You stop begging for closure and start walking with wisdom. That's how the cycle breaks. That's how you step into freedom. That's how you win. From here, the path bends towards something essential. Once you've understood the lesson, the next step is harder. Creating the distance that gives wisdom space to breathe. And that is where we now turn, moving into the second chapter. Imagine trying to stitch a wound while tearing it open again each night. That is what happens when you claim you want to heal, yet you keep them alive in your thoughts. You scroll their pictures, replay old conversations, analyze their silence as if it carries secret codes. You tell yourself you're done, but your actions betray you. What you're doing is not healing. It's self-inflicted torment. I know because I've done it. I told myself I was over someone, yet there I was. Staring at old messages like they were sacred scripture, I convinced myself that a quick glance at their profile wouldn't hurt. But each glimpse was a dagger. Every update a reminder. It was like trying to quit smoking while keeping a pack in my pocket. Pointless, exhausting, self-sabotage disguised as curiosity. The Stoics warned us about this trap. Epictetus wrote, "You become what you give your attention to." If you feed your thoughts with fragments of the past, you stay shackled to the very chains you claim to despise. Healing is impossible while the wound is reopened daily. The truth is harsh but freeing. If they truly valued you, you wouldn't be here forcing yourself to detach. Let that sink in. People who want to stay do not make you feel like an afterthought. They don't leave you begging for crumbs. So here's where the discipline comes in. If you want to reclaim your peace, you must be ruthless. Block if you must mute their posts. Delete the old texts. Stop polishing the good memories while erasing the bad. Nostalgia lies. It paints over the cracks and sells you a false picture. Do not fall for that trick. Every time you let them creep back into your thoughts, you hand them rent-free space in your mind. And your mind is the only kingdom you truly own. Why crown them ruler of it? I remember the day I drew the line. It wasn't dramatic. No big speech. Just a quiet decision. This chapter is closed. The first days felt raw, as if I had amputated something. But slowly the silence began to heal. With each resisted temptation to check their life, I grew stronger. With each day I chose myself. The grip loosened. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Distance is not cruelty. Distance is medicine. Of course, the battle is not instant. Some days you'll feel firm. Other days the pull will return. That's normal, but each moment of resistance is a stone laid in the fortress of your resilience. Each choice not to look back is a reclaiming of self-respect. And little by little, the weight you carried starts to dissolve. Closure doesn't come from them. It comes from you, not from their apology, not from their explanation, not from a neat ending. Closure is created when you choose to step forward without them. This is the heart of psychological distance. It's not about punishing them. It's about protecting you. It's the refusal to let your mind be a museum for ghosts. It's the discipline to see their chapter is finished, not a book you keep rereading in hopes the ending will change. Detachment is a mental game, and the only way to win is to stop playing by their rules. So take back the territory of your thoughts. Guard it as fiercely as you would guard your body, because the moment you stop giving them free real estate in your head, you begin to win, not against them, but for yourself. And in that victory, you rediscover something deeper, the quiet strength of being whole again. From here, the path turns towards something even more demanding, learning to sit with yourself without fear, to embrace solitude not as emptiness but as power. And that is where we go next. Advancing to the third chapter. Imagine a room filled with silence so thick it unsettles you. The walls don't echo with voices. The phone doesn't buzz. There is no one to answer, no one to distract you. For many, that silence feels like rejection, like a sentence handed down by life itself. But solitude isn't exile. It's training in disguise. I once feared that silence. I chased noise to avoid it, scrolling endlessly, drowning myself in small talk, stuffing the emptiness with meaningless chatter. Each distraction was a shield against the discomfort of meeting myself. And yet the more I ran from solitude, the weaker I became. I handed others the power to fill me, to complete me, to convince me I was enough, until the day I stopped running, until the day I sat still and let the silence settle like dust around me. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." The Stoics saw solitude not as absence but as a return. When you sit alone, stripped of noise, you encounter yourself without disguise, and in that encounter strength is forged. The fear of being alone is often just the fear of meeting your own reflection, but once you meet it, once you learn to sit in the presence of your own thoughts without flinching, the fear dissolves. Think of solitude as a training ground. Every moment spent alone without reaching for distraction is a weight lifted, a muscle built. I remember evenings when I resisted the urge to call someone just to escape the quiet. At first my skin crawled with restlessness, but slowly that restlessness became stillness. I picked up books that had gathered dust. I filled journals with thoughts I never admitted to anyone. I discovered that I was already whole, already enough, even without another voice beside me. The silence stopped being a threat. It became home. The truth is this: when you learn to love your own company, no one can control you with their absence. You stop fearing the day someone leaves because you know you remain. That is the danger of a person who has mastered solitude. They are untouchable. Their peace cannot be stolen because it isn't outsourced. Their worth cannot be diminished because it isn't borrowed. Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In solitude, you practice this. You no longer seek to perform for the crowd. You no longer require applause to breathe. You become free from the tyranny of validation. Here's where the transformation deepens. Without solitude, you cling. You cling to toxic relationships, desperate to avoid the echo of your own thoughts. You tolerate mistreatment because anything feels safer than the silence. But when solitude becomes your ally, you cut those ties without fear. You choose presence over poison. You raise your standards. Not because you want to be alone forever, but because you finally understand you're not afraid of it. Start small. One evening without your phone, a meal alone without the shield of conversation, a walk without headphones. At first, the silence will feel heavy. You will crave distraction like an addict craves a fix. But each moment you resist, the silence begins to transform. It becomes a teacher whispering truths you could not hear over the noise. It shows you what you need, what you value, who you are beneath the masks. Seneca reminded us, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Noise is one of the greatest wastes. Solitude, on the other hand, is a wise investment. It compounds in clarity, in strength, in independence. The more time you spend with yourself, the more you realize you are enough. Not because of achievements, not because of compliments, simply because you exist whole and undivided. And in that realization comes a quiet defiance. You stop tolerating those who drain you. You stop bending to those who demand your constant presence. You stop seeking approval like water in a desert. Instead, you choose deliberately who enters your life. You no longer settle for being tolerated. You demand to be valued. And if they cannot give that, you walk away without fear because solitude has taught you you are never walking alone. Most of history's greatest thinkers, artists, and leaders knew this truth. They carved out silence not because they were unloved, but because they understood growth required space. Solitude was their forge. Out of it came wisdom, vision, strength. What they discovered is still true today. Solitude is not emptiness but fullness. The fullness of finding peace within your own mind. So embrace the quiet. Stay in it long enough for the discomfort to turn into calm. In that calm, you will uncover what you've been searching for all along. Peace, confidence, clarity. They were never outside. They were never in someone else's arms. They were waiting inside you, hidden beneath the noise. And as you rise from solitude stronger and freer, the next step appears naturally. Choosing the company that amplifies this strength instead of stealing it, which is where we turn now. Entering the 4th chapter, picture the quiet weight of a room filled with voices that never lift you higher. Conversations that circle back to the past, hands that press you deeper into old wounds, minds that replay regrets like broken records. You think you're healing, but the company you keep pulls you back into the mud. The truth is simple. You become the echo of the voices around you. I once had a friend like this. Every talk we had returned to my mistakes, my regrets, my scars. It felt like chains tightening every time I listened. No matter how much I tried to move forward, their words dragged me back into the shadows I was trying to escape. And the day I stepped away from that friendship was the day I felt the air clear. Freedom came not because life suddenly changed, but because my circle did. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts, but your thoughts take on the color of those you sit beside. Surround yourself with bitterness and you absorb it. Surround yourself with resilience and it begins to flow through you." Detachment then is not just cutting off one person. It is reshaping the entire environment in which your mind breathes. Here's where clarity strikes. Emotional detachment isn't isolation. It's selection. It's not about walling yourself away. It's about deciding who earns the right to enter your inner space. If your circle is full of those who linger in self-pity, you'll find yourself stuck in that same rut. If your circle is made of those who rise after being struck down, you'll start rising too. Strength is contagious. So is weakness. Choose wisely. Think about the people you admire, the ones who have weathered storms without letting those storms define them. They don't sit around dissecting betrayals. They don't treat every heartbreak as a permanent scar. They build, they move, they adapt. Being around them changes you. Their calm steadies you. Their resilience infects you. Their forward motion pushes you out of the mire. You don't even notice at first, but little by little, you stop defining yourself by what you lost and begin to focus on what you're building. Seneca reminded us, associate with people who are likely to improve you. That's not just advice, it's survival. If you keep company with those who resist growth, you will resist growth yourself. If you stand among those who complain and make excuses, you will inherit their habits. But if you align yourself with those who embrace change, who look for solutions, who take responsibility instead of pity, you will naturally start to embody the same. Of course, this is not easy. Walking away from people who've been close, even when their anchor's holding you down, feels brutal. But ask yourself, what's harder? Letting go of the ones who keep you stagnant, or living the rest of your life trapped in a cycle that strangles your potential? One costs pain now, the other costs your future forever. Detachment requires courage, but it rewards you with freedom. Because once you clean your circle, your environment begins to reflect your future instead of your past. You're no longer shackled by conversations that reopen wounds. Instead, you're lifted by voices that remind you of your strength. And slowly your identity shifts. You no longer live in reaction to old losses. You start living in creation of new possibilities. This is where true emotional detachment takes root. Not in isolation, but in alignment. Choosing not just who to remove, but who to allow. Guarding access to your energy like a fortress guards its gates. Letting in those who challenge you to grow. Who won't let you drown in self-pity. Who hold you accountable to the better version of yourself. Those are the companions worthy of your time. Your energy, your presence. So take a hard look at your circle. Ask the brutal questions. Do they push you forward or do they pull you back? Do they reflect your strength or do they amplify your weakness? Your environment will shape your destiny more than your intentions ever will. And the courage to choose is yours. And once you have shaped your circle with wisdom, a new challenge awaits. Learning to stand on your own without fear. To embrace solitude not as emptiness but as the very foundation of freedom. That is where we now turn. At this stage, imagine running from a fire only to seek shelter in another burning house. That is what happens when you leap into a rebound. It feels like relief, like fresh air, like a quick patch over the wound. But beneath the surface, the embers of your pain keep glowing. A new face may distract you for a while, but unhealed wounds always resurface. And when they do, the fire is hotter. I've seen it and I've lived it. Many mistake loneliness for readiness. They think a new connection will erase the old scars, but it doesn't. It only covers them temporarily, like paint on cracked walls. Then the cracks return deeper than before. You carry your baggage into the new bond, comparing, projecting, demanding healing from someone who never caused the wound. And so the cycle continues. Hurt wrapped around hurt, disappointment piled on disappointment. The Stoics would warn us here. Seneca once wrote, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." A rebound is suffering before it is necessary. It is pain delayed, not pain avoided. Healing is not about replacing someone else. Healing is about rebuilding yourself, taking the time to sit in solitude, to reflect on what went wrong, to understand the lesson. Because if you rush forward without that work, you remain tied to the past. You cannot be fully present for someone new, while part of you still belongs to someone old. So here's the harsh truth. A rebound often leaves you lonelier than solitude ever could. Why? Because deep down you know it's forced. You know you're using someone as a bandage, not embracing them as a partner. And when that illusion cracks, the emptiness doubles. You carry two heartbreaks instead of one. That is why the Stoic path is slower but stronger. True healing demands courage to stand still, not run forward blindly. I once watched a friend repeat this pattern for years. Every breakup was followed by a rebound. Every rebound ended in the same disillusionment. It wasn't until they chose to pause, to take a trip alone, to pick up neglected passions, to pour energy into growth that the pattern broke. They stopped searching for completion in others and began finding it within. And from that place of strength, they entered a relationship not from desperation but from choice. The difference was visible in their eyes. Calm, steady, unshaken. This is where your focus must shift. Don't seek a rebound. Seek growth. Travel alone. Pursue the art or the craft you've abandoned. Train your body. Train your mind. Deepen your soul. Build friendships that aren't based on validation, but on shared values. The more you invest in yourself, the stronger you become. And when you finally choose someone again, it won't be to fill a void. It will be to share an abundance. That is what makes a bond unshakable. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Look well into yourself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will always look. The strength you seek is not in another's arms. It is in the quiet decision to face yourself. Once you do, solitude becomes not an enemy but your greatest teacher. You realize you were whole all along, and from that wholeness you will choose differently, love differently, and stand differently. So pause. Resist the temptation to prove you've moved on. Don't seek escape. Seek transformation, because the healthiest relationships are never born from desperation. They are built when two complete individuals choose each other, not because they must, but because they want to. From here, the path widens again. Healing is not only about solitude or avoiding rebounds, it is also about the company you keep, the voices you allow into your circle. And that is the next truth we must face. If this message resonates, take a moment to subscribe and in the comments write just one word: growth. It's a reminder of what you choose today. Not escape, but evolution. You've walked the hard road of letting go, cutting ties, creating distance, learning to sit in silence, refusing to run back into old patterns. But release alone is not the destination. Once the weight has fallen from your hands, you are left standing lighter, freer, and faced with a new question. What will you carry forward now? Letting go clears the ground, but if nothing stronger is built upon it, the same storms will return. This is the turning point where the work shifts from breaking chains to forging foundations, from escaping weakness to establishing strength. And so the path unfolds further. Imagine standing at the edge of a clearing after miles of tangled forest. You've broken free from the shadows of attachment. But the question now looms: what principles will you plant in this new ground you've won? As we step into the next chapter, imagine standing at the edge of a clearing after walking for miles through tangled forest. You've broken free from the shadows of attachment. But the question now looms: what will you build with this freedom? It is not enough to simply release someone. The space they leave must be filled. And if you don't fill it with strength, old patterns will come crawling back. Freedom without direction is just drifting, and drifting always circles back to the shore. You tried so hard to leave. I learned this after one of the hardest goodbyes of my life. I had detached, cut the ties, silenced the noise. For the first time in years, the air felt lighter. But then came the pull of the old habits, the urge to slip back, to lower my standards, to invite weakness back under a different name. That's when I realized breaking away is not the end. It is the beginning. This is where inner standards come in. Without them, detachment is incomplete. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." What he meant was simple. Clarity of principle is what keeps you upright when the winds of temptation return. If you don't set values to stand on, you will fall for anything dressed as comfort. And in matters of the heart, comfort can be deadly. Think of standards as the architecture of your inner fortress. A fortress is not built when the enemy arrives. It is built long before, stone by stone, gate by gate. After detachment, you must ask yourself, what will I no longer tolerate? What lines will I never cross again? For me, it was simple yet sharp. I would never again justify disrespect because of someone's potential. I would never again let silence speak louder than actions. I would never again beg for clarity where there was only avoidance. Seneca warned, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." How much time is wasted repeating the same wounds because we never set standards? To detach is to stop the bleeding. To build standards is to prevent the wound from reopening. It's not about building walls to keep everyone out. It's about building gates strong enough to let the right ones in and keep the wrong ones out. I remember watching a friend go through endless cycles of heartbreak. Every time they swore they were done with the pain, and every time they welcomed someone new who wore the same mask as the last. Why? Because they had no standards, only feelings. And feelings, when unguarded, can drag you into the same fire over and over again. When they finally decided no more half-hearted love, no more excuses, everything shifted. Their circle changed. Their energy sharpened, and slowly they began to attract relationships that reflected their own self-respect. Here's the truth. People will always treat you according to the limits you set. If your boundaries are vague, so will be their respect. If your values are negotiable, so will be their loyalty. But when your standards are unshakable, you stop being an easy target. You no longer bleed for anyone who cuts carelessly. You become harder to reach, not because you're cold, but because you're clear. And clarity is magnetic. Those who cannot meet your standards will drift away, frustrated by their own inability to shake you. But those who can will rise to the occasion, drawn by the strength of your presence. It is not arrogance. It is alignment. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do." Detachment gives you the chance to finally answer that question. Who do you want to be? And what standards must you set to live as that person? Do not mistake this for perfectionism. Standards are not about chasing flawless people. They are about refusing to abandon yourself. They are about knowing your worth so deeply that you would rather stand alone in peace than kneel with someone who drains you. And once you taste that peace, compromise feels like poison. So take the silence that detachment gives you and fill it with principles. Write them down. Etch them into your daily choices. Guard them as a soldier guards his oath, because the world will test you again. Old faces may return. New ones may arrive wearing the same disguise. And in those moments, your standards will be your shield. As I look back now, I see the pattern clearly. Without standards, every detachment was temporary. With them, detachment became permanent freedom. The pain stopped being a revolving door and became a closed chapter. And in that chapter's ending, a new story began. The story of someone who no longer waits for respect but demands it by the way they live. And from this ground of principle, a new power rises. Once your values are firm, your energy shifts. The question then becomes, what will you do with the strength that detachment and clarity have given you? The answer lies in where you direct that energy. Next, moving into the next chapter, imagine holding a torch in your hand after years of stumbling in the dark. The fire was always there, hidden within you, but you never used it because you kept lighting your path with someone else's flame. Now that you've reclaimed it, the question is clear. Where will you direct this energy? Because detachment doesn't kill energy, it releases it. And once released, it must be invested with purpose, or it will turn back on you as restlessness, regret, and temptation to return to what you escaped. I remember the first time I felt this surge. After breaking free from a bond that drained me, I suddenly had long evenings to myself. A silence that once felt unbearable now stretched wide. At first it was confusing. The energy that used to go into waiting for messages, rehearsing conversations, rereading old memories, it had nowhere to go. And so it lingered, restless, pulling me toward familiar habits. That's when I understood this is not emptiness. This is raw material. What I do with it will determine whether I rise or fall. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." When the energy of attachment is released, your thoughts will try to claim it. If you don't guide it, it will spiral back into longing, obsession, or bitterness. But if you choose wisely, that same force becomes fuel. Detachment hands you back the energy you once wasted. Now the task is to redirect it toward growth. Here's where discipline replaces desperation. Pour that energy into training your body until it moves with strength again. Pour it into your craft, your studies, your work, the pursuits you abandoned while clinging to someone who didn't see you. Pour it into building skills that sharpen your mind, habits that fortify your soul. Every hour you once gave to replaying their words can now be spent writing your own. The energy once wasted on proving worth now builds it. I knew a man who went through a brutal breakup. For months he drowned in grief, scrolling through pictures waiting for her to return. But one day, he decided that if he was going to hurt, the pain should at least build something. He began running each morning, pouring the ache into miles. Then he started studying at night, learning skills he had long put off. Within a year, he had a new body, a new career, and a new sense of calm. She had left. But what remained was a man remade by his own energy. The wound had become the forge. Seneca said, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. That is the essence of this chapter. The same struggle that once threatened to break you can, if redirected, make you unshakable. But it requires vigilance. Energy left idle will decay. Energy redirected will refine. The choice is always yours. Don't mistake this for avoidance. This isn't about drowning pain in business or running from the echoes of memory. This is about transmutation. You don't deny the energy. You don't suppress it. You convert it. Like a river diverted into channels that irrigate fields instead of flooding villages. Your energy becomes a source of growth rather than destruction. And here's the truth few admit. Growth is not glamorous. It's not a quick surge of triumph. It's slow mornings when you choose discipline over distraction. It's nights when you sit with the urge to look back, but instead you read, you write, you build. Each small act is a brick laid in the foundation of a new self. And over time the fortress rises, not with noise, but with silent strength. As you channel your energy, something shifts inside. The cravings to return to old patterns grow weaker. The pull of the past loses its grip. Why? Because you're no longer empty. You filled the void with creation, with purpose, with growth. And once you've tasted that, the past feels small, almost foreign. So ask yourself, what will you build with the energy you've reclaimed? A stronger body, a sharper mind, a clearer vision. Whatever you choose, make it worthy of the struggle you endured. Because pain wasted is pain repeated, but pain invested becomes power. From here, the journey deepens again. Once your energy is redirected into growth, another challenge emerges. The opinions of others, the noise of the crowd, the pull of external judgment. And the next step is learning how to stand unmoved in the face of it. Advancing to the next chapter. Imagine standing in a crowded room where voices swirl like a storm, each one carrying opinions about who you are, what you should do, how you should live. Their words don't just fill the air. They press against your chest, tug at your decisions, and whisper into your doubts. If you are not careful, you begin to live not as yourself, but as a reflection of their judgments. This is the silent chain many never break. And yet the Stoics taught us, the weight of another's opinion is only as heavy as the grip we allow it to have. I remember when I was younger, chasing validation as if it were oxygen. Every compliment lifted me. Every criticism cut me down. My peace was no longer mine. It was rented out to the voices around me. Marcus Aurelius warned, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." And he was right. Until I learned to practice indifference, I was not free. I was chained to approval, a prisoner of other people's passing thoughts. Here's where the shift must happen. Detachment is not complete until you also detach from the need to be seen a certain way. Imagine a warrior entering battle who flinches at every insult shouted from the crowd. He will lose before the first blade touches him. But the one who marches forward deaf to the noise, rooted only in his purpose, that one is unstoppable. In life, the enemy is not their judgment. The enemy is your dependence on it. Seneca said, "What progress, you ask, have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself." That is the key. When you are anchored in your own principles, opinions lose their grip. Praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't shatter you. You begin to walk in a kind of calm that unsettles those who need you to react. Your peace becomes untouchable because it no longer hangs on their approval. Let me share a moment. After a season of detachment, I returned to places where people still carried their old views of me. Some thought I had lost. Others whispered I was bitter. In the past, their voices would have driven me to explain, to defend, to prove them wrong. But this time I said nothing. I lived, I acted, I kept building. Months later, those same voices grew quiet. Not because I silenced them, but because I no longer fed them. The silence of indifference is often louder than any rebuttal. This is not arrogance. It is clarity. To stand unmoved does not mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop being ruled by their shifting opinions. One day they praise you, the next day they condemn you. To be tossed by that tide is to live without a compass. But when your compass is within, when your principles guide you, you walk straight even when the winds howl. Think about it. How many choices in your life were not yours at all, but the echo of someone else's judgment? How many times did you stay in places you should have left, just because you feared being misunderstood? How many dreams did you bury because the crowd might laugh? Each of those moments is a reminder that without indifference to opinion, freedom is an illusion. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." To the crowd, indifference looks like pride, but to the free soul it is peace. And when you reach that place, you no longer scramble to control the narrative. You simply live it. Your life itself becomes the answer. And here's the paradox. Once you stop living for approval, genuine respect begins to follow. People may not always agree with you, but they cannot ignore the calm strength of someone who moves without needing their permission. That is the quiet power of indifference. It doesn't seek to win the crowd, yet it commands their attention. So let their words swirl. Let the judgments rise and fall like passing storms. You remain the mountain rooted, steady, unmoved. Because the moment you learn that opinions are just noise, you step into a freedom that few ever taste. From here, another truth emerges. When pain comes, you no longer waste it on bitterness. You can turn it into fuel, into direction, into purpose. And that is the next step on this path. Here's where the journey deepens. When pain no longer feels like a punishment, but begins to look like a tool, imagine holding a shard of broken glass in your hand. At first it only cuts, but in the right hands, shaped and sharpened. That same shard can become a blade, a weapon not to destroy but to protect, to carve a new path forward. Pain when left unchecked makes you bitter. Pain when channeled makes you unstoppable. I once met a man who lost everything he thought defined him. His partner, his stability, even his sense of identity. For months he drowned in grief, convinced life had singled him out for cruelty. But slowly something shifted. He began to rise before dawn, running in the cold, pouring his heartbreak into each mile. He took up work he once thought beneath him, shaping it into discipline, and day by day his pain transformed from weight into fuel. The loss didn't destroy him, it remade him. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. What feels unbearable now is the very thing that will shape your resilience later. The heartbreak that burned you raw becomes the fire that tempers you. The betrayal that shattered your trust becomes the teacher that sharpens your discernment. The abandonment that left you alone becomes the moment you discover solitude's power. Nothing is wasted if you are willing to use it." Think about your own scars. How many of them taught you lessons comfort never could? How many boundaries were born from wounds you swore you'd never endure again? The truth is, comfort never demands growth. Only pain does. And when you begin to see pain as raw material instead of poison, you step into a strength most people never touch. But this requires choice. Many let pain fester. They replay it. They build shrines to it. They carry it like chains. That is not stoic strength. That is surrender. The wiser path is to turn the wound into direction. To take what hurt you and let it define not your weakness but your purpose. A heartbreak might inspire you to write words that heal others. A betrayal might push you to build a life so steady that no absence can collapse it. A failure might ignite the discipline to rise stronger than before. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Read that again. What stands in the way becomes the way. The obstacle is not an interruption. It is the path itself. And if you can hold that perspective, pain stops being something you run from. It becomes the compass that points you forward. I recall a time when I thought pain had stripped me of everything. In truth, it stripped me only of illusions. Illusions of permanence, illusions of control, illusions of guarantees. What it left me with was raw life, unpolished and unshielded. And in that rawness, I built something cleaner. The pain I cursed became the exact force that made me unshakable. So here is the choice you must face. Will your pain be wasted, recycled endlessly as bitterness, or will it be burned clean, reshaped into fuel for a life sharper, wiser, more resilient than the one you left behind? When you decide to channel pain into purpose, you stop asking why it happened and start asking what it will build. You stop being the victim of it and become the architect of your response. That is real detachment, not escape, but transformation. And as you stand stronger, sharpened by fire, another realization waits. Strength is not only surviving the wound. It is learning you were already whole without what was lost. That is the freedom waiting in the next step. At this stage, imagine standing in a room with no noise, no demands, no one to please, just silence, just breath, just you. Many fear this moment, but those who endure detachment discover something different. The silence is not emptiness. It is freedom. The final step is not rejection of others, but the realization that you were never incomplete at all. I recall mornings when absence felt like a weight pressing down on me. I thought strength meant finding someone new, filling the space with another presence. But over time I learned strength was not in replacement. It was in recognition. Nothing was missing. The peace I longed for had always been within. Marcus Aurelius said, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself." For years we search outside through approval, presence, promises. When the truth is simpler, no one can grant you what you refuse to grant yourself. We cling to connections out of fear of solitude, convincing ourselves that half-hearted bonds are better than none. But Epictetus warned, if you want to be invincible, do not enter into contests you cannot control. Depending on others for peace is the contest you always lose. I once knew someone who endured betrayal after betrayal. Each time she rushed to find someone new, hoping to erase the scars. But healing never came. It was only when she stopped running, traveled alone, pursued growth for herself that she found what she had been missing. Not another person, but her own wholeness. And when love did return, she chose it freely, not desperately. This is the essence of self-sufficiency. It is not arrogance. It is not isolation. It is the quiet wealth of needing little to be at peace. Seneca wrote, "The man who is content to be the least dependent is the most wealthy. And when you no longer fear loss, every bond you form becomes purer, built not on need but on freedom." So the end of detachment is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is clarity, confidence, and peace discovered within yourself. And once you live from that wholeness, every choice you make carries not the weight of fear but the strength of freedom. Detachment is not about shutting down your heart. It is about remembering that your peace is yours to protect. To detach emotionally from someone is to step back into your own strength. It is to loosen the ties that drain your energy, distort your sense of worth, and bind you to what has already passed. This is not coldness. This is freedom. There will be days when nostalgia whispers. You may feel the urge to reach for what once felt familiar, to replay old moments as if they still hold life. But the truth is, those echoes belong to yesterday. Every time you choose to stay anchored in the present, every time you choose yourself over illusions, you grow lighter. The path of detachment is not smooth, yet with each step you reclaim more of who you are. The Stoics reminded us that what is meant to remain will remain, and what departs was never truly ours to hold. People come into our lives as blessings or as lessons. Both serve their purpose. Blessings remind us of joy. Lessons teach us clarity. To release someone with grace is not to lose. It is to rise. Never forget the only person who walks with you for a lifetime is you. Invest in that bond above all others. Know that you do not need another to complete you. You are already whole. When you see yourself in that light, your power multiplies. You stop begging for respect. You start living in alignment with your own worth. So let go of the weight that was never love, only attachment disguised as it. Breathe deeper. Stand taller. Move forward with eyes fixed on the life you deserve. Every choice to honor your own growth is another step toward freedom. If this message speaks to you, take a moment to subscribe so you continue building this strength week after week. And in the comments, write just 2 words. Choose peace. Let it be both a reminder to yourself and an encouragement to others. You are stronger than your pain, stronger than your past, stronger than the doubts that sometimes rise against you. Walk forward with that truth in your heart and be ready for the next lesson that will take you even higher. Stay stoic, stay blessed,